Hey, I like that so much. Let's do it again. Let's talk about cues. Or as I love telling people, I had a student once who had never heard the word pronounced, not this word. I'm sure they've heard the word cue, like, cue card, but they'd never heard this word pronounced. And when I said cues, they said, "Oh, is that how you pronounce that?" I go, "Yeah, why? What do you think it was?" And they said, "Quayway." And Quayway is a lot more fun. I think we'd all agree with that. And Quayway and Dequayway. It's a lot more fun, but Anyway, cues. So when I say the word cue, what do you think of? And I don't know about you, but this is what I think of. I think of this nightmare of a line. I think of the DMV. I think of, a roller coaster ride. I think of any sort of, you know, stoplight. I think of waiting in a grocery store. Anything that makes me impatient. That's what I think of. And this kind of bureaucratic nightmare is the inspiration for the name queue. It is, anything where you're waiting in a line that is first in, first out, first come, first serve, right? This is the difference. That is a queue, right? And that's different than our stack, which was last in, first out, right? So queues are first in, first out data structures. Access to the content of the queue is done on opposite ends of the queue, right? So you insert at one end and you remove from another end. And you can never see inside of a queue. This is why stacks and queues are typically taught at the same time, because their functionality is wildly different, but many, many, many of the principles hold, right? Just got to tweak it a little bit. So you can never see inside a queue, just like you can never see inside of a stack. And these are real common for ordering and prioritizing data based on when they arrive. That's their big key. So queues are very old, obviously, right? Like, processing data in order is kind of a elementary thing that computers do. The terminology has not been as standardized as it has with stacks. Like I'm sure queues were used longer than stacks, but probably no one realized, hey, this is a central sort of behavior. This is an abstract data structure as opposed to a stack, which is a little odd. People are like, oh yeah, no, we're removing from the same end that we're inserting. This has probably got to be its own thing. Regardless, the standardization of terminology with a queue is not quite as strong. The one thing that is almost universal is that they take a horizontal orientation like this, and we'll talk about front and back, but really any sort of term that you would use for waiting in a line is probably viable. So if you said I'm at the front of the queue, or I'm next out of the queue, or I'm first in line, right? Or I'm at the head of the line, or I just got in the back of the line, or I'm last in the queue, right? All of these terms, they're okay. You're not going to confuse someone, and I'm not going to get real anal about terminology if you're using those sorts of terms, as opposed to stacks, right? Again, I'm at the front of the stack, makes no sense. So we can be a little looser with this terminology as long as we're in the right flavor of concept. And our interface is fairly standardized. This is a little less common, right? We have NQ and DQ. I've also heard of add and remove or put and get. But NQ and DQ I see a lot of, so we're going to stick with that NQuayway and DQuayway. Like I said, it's a lot more fun. And these are the Q equivalent to push and pop. NQ puts it in, DQ tries to take it out. And just like our stack, we have three other very common methods. Front or first. We're going to use first. These are pretty much, I see these two equivalently. So front or first tries to access the thing that's going to come off the queue next, but doesn't remove it. Okay. And len tells you the number of elements in the queue is empty, is true if there's no elements in the queue. Okay. The one thing of note is that just like with peak and top, if you have front, you don't usually have first. If you have first, you don't usually have front. But the other thing is you cannot simulate this. You cannot simulate this method with these methods, right? Unlike stack, you can't go pop push, right? There's no way to do that without cycling through the entire queue. So that is one difference. But just like a stack, if you try to get an element in the queue and there's no element, if you try to DQ front or first and there's nothing in the queue, you're going to get an exception of some sort. So we can talk about some examples of the content. We're going to assume this line here is our queue. We're going to assume that closer to the left is the front and closer to the right is the back. Okay, so we create a queue and we go NQ10, NQ20. And then we print our length. How many elements? Well, we got 2. Now we NQ30 and we DQ. We DQ and then print. So what do? We DQ, we DQ 30, and then we print it. I'm sorry. See, look at me. We don't DQ 30. Haha, I tricked you. Wish I could claim to be that cagey. I did not trick you. I had a stroke. We don't DQ from the back, right? We DQ from the front. So we DQ 10, and we print it. Glad I caught that. We DQ again. We DQ 20. And we print that. Now we print the front. Now we see, is it empty? No, it's not empty. We still got 30 in there, right? And just like the stack, right? If you've only got one element in it, 30 is at the front and the back. If you've only got one element in your stack, 30 is both at the top and the bottom. It's very convenient. Hey, we DQ. Cool. Gonna erase that. We DQ 30. And we print that. Now is it empty? Yes, it is. Now we call front. Uh-oh. We have an exception or an error of some sort. Fine. We get past there, we NQ 40. So again, behavior is pretty straightforward and independent of the implementation.